Good afternoon, students. This is your teacher, Mr. Steckley. I'd like to read a book with you today, and it is called Caps for Sale, a tale of a peddler, some monkeys, and their monkey business. This book is by Esphyr Slobadkina. She also did the illustrations for this book. Before we start reading, I'd like to look at the cover and see what information we can find out. There are several words that you may not understand on the cover here. The first one I would think would be caps. That's something you're probably not familiar with, but we will look at that word when we get into the story. The other one is peddler. Peddler is a person. If we look at the cover, you'll see that there's a man sleeping up in this tree. I'm guessing that he's a peddler. Let's read and find out. Let's begin on the first page. Once there was a peddler who sold caps, but he was not like any ordinary peddler, carrying his wares on his back. He carried them on top of his head. I'd like to stop at this point to discuss the word peddler. In the first sentence of the book, it says that once there was a peddler who sold caps. I'm guessing from what I've read that a peddler is someone who sells something. And this man sells caps. Let's continue reading. First, he had his own checked cap, then a bunch of gray caps, then a bunch of brown caps, then a bunch of blue caps, and on the very top, a bunch of red caps. I'd like to take a look at the word caps now. It says that the peddler wears the caps on top of his head. Now, if you look at the illustration, you'll see that he has a bunch of hats on top of his head. I'm guessing that caps is another word for hats. And in fact, let's continue reading. He walked up and down the streets, holding himself very straight, so as not to upset his caps. As he went along, he called, "Caps for sale! Caps for sale! 50 cents a cap!" One morning, he couldn't sell any caps. He walked up the street and he walked down the street calling, "Caps for sale! Caps for sale! 50 cents a cap!" But nobody wanted any caps that morning. Nobody even wanted a red cap. Well, he began to feel very hungry, but he had no money for lunch. "I think I'll go for a walk in the country," he said. And he walked out of town, slowly, slowly, so as not to upset his caps. He walked for a long time until he came to a great big tree. "That's a nice place for a rest," thought he. And he sat down very slowly under the tree and leaned back little by little against the tree trunk so as not to disturb the caps on his head. Then he put up his hand to feel if they were straight. First his own checked cap, then the gray caps, then the brown caps, then the blue caps, then the red caps on the very top. They were all there, so he went to sleep. He slept for a long time. When he woke up, he was refreshed and rested. But before standing up, he felt with his hand to make sure his caps were in the right place. All he felt was his own checked cap. He looked to the right of him. No caps. He looked to the left of him. No caps. He looked in the back of him. No caps. He looked behind the tree. No caps. Then he looked up into the tree. And what do you think he saw? On every branch sat a monkey. On every monkey was a gray or a brown or a blue or a red cap. The peddler looked at the monkeys. The monkeys looked at the peddler. He didn't know what to do. Finally, he spoke to them. "You monkeys, you," he said, shaking his finger at them. "You give me back my caps." But the monkeys only shook their fingers back at him and said, "Tz, tz, tz." This made the peddler angry, so he shook both his hands at them and he said, "You monkeys, you! You give me back my caps!" But the monkeys only shook both their hands back at him and said, "Tz, tz, 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 tz." Now he felt quite angry. He stamped his foot and he said, "You monkeys, you! You better give me back my caps!" But the monkeys only stamped their feet back at him and said, "Tz, tz, 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 tz." By this time, the peddler was really very, very angry. He stamped both his feet and he shouted, "You monkeys, you! You must give me back my caps!" But the monkeys only stamped both their feet back at him and said, "Tz, tz, 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 tz."
Before we turn the page, I wanted to ask if anyone has noticed what the monkeys are doing. Now, if you said that the monkeys are doing exactly what the peddler is doing, then you're correct. The monkeys are mimicking, or they're repeating what the peddler is doing. So let's continue reading and see what happens next.
At last he became so angry that he pulled off his own cap, threw it to the ground, and began to walk away. But then each monkey pulled off his cap, and all the gray caps, and all the brown caps, and all the blue caps, and all the red caps came flying down out of the tree.
So the monkeys were repeating what the peddler did, and they threw their caps on the ground when the peddler threw his down. Now let's finish the story.
So the peddler picked up his caps and put them back on his head. First his own checked cap, then the gray caps, then the brown caps, then the blue caps, then the red caps on the very top. And slowly, slowly he walked back to town calling, "Caps! Caps for sale! 50 cents a cap!" The end.